Hey, haven't posted something for a while, so I thought I would post something that kind of piqued my interest last night. So I watched this video by Ahoy, which kind of documents this really just kind of sweet and interesting deep dive into some digital archaeology. Essentially, he has this pixel image, this pixelated image, which he wants to restore. That no existing copy is left. If you haven't seen it, definitely watch it. But essentially, he goes through a process of restoring and kind of doing this sleuthing to understand what the original parameters were for this image. I think I thought it was really great. But the method he goes about it is very manual, and it kind of it really piqued my interest because this is the sort of problem that you can really kind of start looking at computationally. And I wanted to give that a go and kind of explain how I worked through the problem, and how I don't know, maybe someone else wants to pick it up and improve it, because the result isn't perfect, and it never truly is perfect. But yeah, it's kind of really interesting exercise computationally. So this is the original image here, and you can see it's a scan of a picture that someone took of a CRT monitor that has been printed and then scanned. I don't know if I said that in the right order, but it's gone through many processes. So you can see like the pixels are very fuzzy. There's printing artifacts. You can see the CMYK kind of dots there. Yeah, it is high quality scan, but there's a lot of noise in this system. And there's actually a lot of kind of interference patterns, which will show up later as we kind of process this image. So our goal is to try and reconstruct this in a native pixel format. So I've taken the information that Ahoy gathered, which is amazing. So I've got this color palette, I've got the original dimensions. I'm not going to go down the rabbit path of stretched pixels. I'm just going to keep it simple and just have square pixels. So essentially I'm doing this in Rhino with Grasshopper. So to start off with, I created a grid on top of this picture. From that grid, I'm grabbing some points and I'm essentially reparameterizing this surface that this texture is on so that I can get the UV coordinates for each of these points. So that when it gets sent into this image sampler, each point is going to return an RGB value that it reads from that texture. So what comes out of here is a bunch of RGB values. And essentially, we want to be able to connect or find a way to find the closest swatch color to the color that it's being sampled from this image, if that makes sense. So we need to find the shortest distance from one color to the closest color that it matches in the swatch. So what we can do to visualize this is actually we can visualize colors as points in 3D space, because colors have, well, RGB values have 3 values, so we can understand them as a point in space. So to do that, we can have a look. Firstly, we can have a look at what the palettes look like in 3-dimensional space. So this is this palette here, and these are kind of spheres that represent those colors in 3D space. So we know where these palettes exist, and then we also can understand where the colors from that sampled image exist in 3D space. So this swarm of colorful points here are all the samples that we're taking from this image. So you can see that like blue is all clustered around this swatch here. So essentially computationally, we want to be able to say, well, if you're closer to this big blue mesh here, you should use that color. So we're remapping the colors into these kind of categories. And in Rhino, you can actually use their built-in library in Python. I think it's using point clouds, closest point, point cloud object, closest point. So all we have to do essentially is test each point and say which point in this palette are you closest to, 3-dimensionally. And if we look at the results of that, and if I hide the image, you can see we have an interesting result. So what this actually starts to bring to the surface, which I thought was really interesting, is it actually really illustrates that this was in fact a picture of a television screen or a CRT monitor, because you can see the interference patterns. Is that what they're called, interference patterns? If you're old enough, you've tried to take video of a CRT, you'll have these kind of patternations going on. So that's really interesting. That's something that's been revealed by this process. So you can see like these are essentially just dots on the screen, but if you zoom out enough, it sort of covers the viewport. So this is not great. One of the big issues is that there's so much noise in the system, in the image to begin with. So one thing I thought of that we could do to try and make that a little bit more readable is instead of having, if we bring our little image back, so instead of one sample point per pixel, we've now essentially got a bunch of pixels. So we do a bunch of sampling per pixel, and then we average out between those samples to find the average, essentially. So that kind of tries to get rid of any noise or variance within that system. So that's what I've done. So if we look at the output of that, you can see that is a lot better. So now we've got a pretty good representation of the original. If I just copy, so let's go compare them. So that's the original on the left, and that's the sampled on the right. You can see it's not perfect, but it's definitely a good starting point, I reckon. And we've gotten rid of the interference noise. I was playing with this earlier, and it's kind of interesting. If you go down to like the separation between sample points, there are like certain numbers that will reveal those interference points again. So that's quite interesting. But I think the separation between sample points, I think the best one I found was 0.3. But yeah, like it's not perfect. You can see like there's quite a bit of missing detail in the lettuce, missing detail in the shading here. And this pickle is gray instead of green. I did do some processing on the image in Photoshop because the one I found on the internet was really desaturated. So yeah, I guess this is where I'm at. I'm not going to spend any more time doing this, but I thought this was a really interesting exercise just to see how you might tackle it from a different perspective. And I'd be really interested to hear if anyone is able to actually make an exact copy or is able to pass through the noise in the system to make a much better copy. yeah, so I'm going to upload this up to a GitHub, so anyone can have a look and try their hand if they want to make a better output. Yeah, I thought this was a really cute little exercise. Anyway, thank you. Bye.